Dan and Amy's vice presidential debate last night. It worked so well for Obama and Joe Biden that Tim Kaine thought he would rinse and repeat the old bin Laden's dead and GM's alive. That was bin Laden is one of Hillary Clinton's signature foreign policy accomplishments, according to Tim Kaine. And that's made the world safer in part. And
I didn't like that, though. I mean, him taking accomplishments for that. That was a bit of a stretch, don't you think?
Well, it's a bit of a chore to find foreign policy accomplishments for Hillary, so Kaine didn't have an easy job. And then the exchange over Putin, and it was Kaine focusing on Trump's comments about Putin and Pence responding. And this is one of those moments where if Donald Trump is going to do a little prep work between now and Sunday, this is one of the answers that he may want to cut and paste from Mike Pence.
Donald Trump is a businessman, not a career politician.
That's not the one, but this is.
Mr. Trump said, quote, Putin has no respect for Hillary Clinton and no respect for Obama. Do you think he'll respect a Trump-Pence administration?
Strength. Plain and simple. Business. Donald Trump, that's nonsense. Donald Trump's son leader says who is going to lead with American strength. We're going to rebuild our military. And let me say this whole Putin thing. Look, America is stronger than Russia. Our economy is 16 times larger than the Russian economy. America's political system is superior to the crony, corrupt capitalist system in Russia in every way. When Donald Trump and I observe that, as I've said, in Syria, in Iran, in Ukraine, that the small and bullying leader of Russia has been stronger on the world stage than this administration, that's stating painful facts. That's not an endorsement of Vladimir Putin. That's an indictment of the weak and feckless leadership of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama.
Bingo! And for more on this and the question that was batted back and forth with the moderator sometimes chiming in, about the world being a safer place thanks to President Obama and Hillary Clinton in the last 7.5 years of their reign. We're joined by our friend, Fox News national security analyst KT McFarland. KT, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Amy.
Well, what about that question? The world is safer because we have fewer troops in theaters in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Middle East. We've got bin Laden in the grave, and I don't know. There were a couple other things Tim Kaine came up with that I can't remember because they were unmemorable. But what about the larger question?
Well, Kaine had a harder time because it's a pretty failed foreign policy no matter which continent you pick. And so he was kind of grasping at straws. As far as what Pence did when he said, with the response to the Putin question, I thought it was the best answer of the night when he said strength. You know, if you look at Russian history, what do they respect? Strength. Who did they actually deal well with? Reagan, strength. How did we win the Cold War without firing a shot? Using our economic strength, our political and ideological strength. We didn't have to fight them because we did them in using the other elements of national power that the United States has an advantage in, technology, the economy, our political system. So I thought Pence had not only a great night, but that was a particularly good answer.
Well, and on the topic of Russia and Putin, the debater or the moderator, Elaine, went back to ask Senator Kaine about the Russian reset. What went wrong? And Kaine's answer was also instructive. It presented a nice contrast. Kaine essentially didn't admit anything went wrong and said that Hillary Clinton has shown an ability to work with Putin and she knows how to collaborate with him. That's what that's what the Russian reset is, collaborating with Putin?
Well, it's a left-wing sort of fantasy that as long as you're negotiating, as long as you're sitting down at a table and talking, somehow things are getting better. No, they're not. They're only getting better if you're negotiating from a position of strength. Because if you're not, if you're negotiating from a position of weakness or you've given up your leverage, you're not negotiating. You're begging.
No,
you're just hoping for the best. Maybe things will turn out well in the end. You know, rainbows and puppies and unicorns. No, when you negotiate with the Russians, you do it from a position of strength. And then you tell them what you want. And privately, you're tough with them. Publicly, you're probably respectful of them. And the whole approach that the Obama administration has had from the very beginning was, after the 5 minutes of Hillary's reset, President Obama continued to lecture. He has lectured Vladimir Putin for 7 years. the great arc of history is turning against you. Mr. Putin, what you don't understand is blah, 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 blah.
And just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but and just 1.2, and when you're not strong with them, you get kicked out of Syria.
Well, you kicked out of Syria. Look, we left Syria, and we're now no longer in a position to shape events. And when Kerry said, well, we're having negotiations with the Russians, no, you're not. You just had a photo op. You're not. They don't care if you're there or not. And the new Middle East reality is it's a Russian, Iranian, Iraqi, Assad of Syria alliance. And if the United States gets in the middle of it, too bad for you.
Well, before we get to Syria, I just wanted to get your opinion on this because Russians were polled. A majority of the citizens there want Donald Trump to be president. Putin wants Trump to be president. Why is that?
Putin wants Trump? I don't think Putin wants Trump. I don't think Putin cares who's going to be president. I think he's got a plan either way. And his plan for now is to try to disrupt the American election. Why? Because he thinks it's payback. He thinks we've interrupted and interfered with the Ukrainian election, with the Russian election. Did we? Did we not? It's in his mind, we did. So for him, this is legitimate payback. I think the way you deal with Russia is the way Pence outlined. First, build up the military. That's what Reagan understood. If you don't have any leverage, go get some. And the way we get leverage is we rebuild our military. Secondly, publicly, acknowledge that Putin has taken his country from the desperate times of the 1990s when people were going to the McDonald's in Red Square and going out the back and hoping to get food that was left in some of the containers because otherwise they weren't eating for the day. Putin has rebuilt his country. He has been good for his country. He's been terrible for us, but he's been good for his country. He's had a weak hand, and he's played it very well at home and abroad. But that hand is playing out to the extent that his economy is 1/16 the size of ours. Excuse me. And his economy is not going to get any better because oil prices, which is his economy, have collapsed. They're not going back up, and Putin needs a strategic partner. I would, if Putin is as desperate as I think he is in private, not in public, but in private, I think we have an opportunity to offer him a deal. You get out of the Middle East, you get out of Europe, you don't have an alliance, a military alliance with Iran. We'll work together to defeat radical Islam, and we will help you develop the parts of your economy which you need. We are the only ones who can do that.
And I just want to clarify something. He's been good for his country, but not if you're freedom-loving. He hasn't been good for his country if you're a journalist or you're a musician or you're...
No,
right, I just want to clarify that.
Fair enough. No, he has not been expanded the rights of his people, but he's expanded the power of his people and the standard of living of his people.
One of the other interested strategic allies of Vlad Putin is Iran, and according to Tim Kaine, again, an accomplishment of Hillary and Obama is preventing Iran from getting nuclear weapons.
Oh, please. They have given Iran a legal path to a nuclear weapon within a decade. The loophole in the nuke deal, there were two. One, they didn't prevent Iran from buying nuclear weapons from somebody else. In other words, North Korea, with which Iran and North Korea have collaborated on their nuclear programs. They also, by giving Iran all the money, have given Iran the money to buy nuclear weapons from somebody. And the second loophole was that they never talked about the missile systems. Now, why do those matter? Because the only way you can get a nuclear weapon from Iran to the United States is on the back of a missile. So they should have prevented missile development as well as nuclear development. So I think the deal was flawed from the get-go. And the more and more we find out about it, there were secret side deals. We lifted the sanctions early. We've delivered the money in cash on pallets in an unmarked plane in the dark of the night in a remote corner of an airport. All these things added together show that this administration was desperate for an Iran deal, even one that was endangered American national security, because they wanted the bragging rights and the legacy of saying, we got an Iran deal.
I want to move over to Syria. One of the headlines yesterday was that the White House warns of quote-unquote actions if Russia won't negotiate. Is there a possibility of bringing ground troops into Syria? Is President Obama considering that?
I think he's just trying to buy time. I think he's got the clock on the wall, and he says every morning, what can I do to get to that point where I don't have to get involved in the Middle East? So that his grand scheme is to say, I'm the guy that got us out of the Middle East. The guy before me, George Bush, is the one that started the Iraq War. The guy after me, or gal after me, is the one who had to lose it. Me, Obama, I just bought time. Nothing bad happened on my watch. Will he put? We already have 5,000 ground troops in Syria, in Iraq and Syria. And the argument that, we had to get out, which is what the argument in the debate was last night. We had to get out because we couldn't get a status of forces agreement with Iraq, so we had to pull our 10,000 troops out. Well, wait a minute. You got 5,000 troops back in now, and you don't have that status of forces agreement. So that's a phony argument. And what will Obama try to do? My guess is that every American forces in the region is going to try to duck under cover when the Russian planes come by so that we don't have an incident.
Now, not only is it a phony argument, it was news to Hillary that we still had troops on the ground in Iraq per the first debate. With respect to Syria, it was another interesting moment. Kaine agreeing with Pence about the concept for a safe zone refugee camp for Syrian refugees in the region as opposed to in places like Indianapolis.
Right.
That's not a position Hillary Clinton has taken because she wants to increase the number of Syrian refugees that we take in by a factor of 20.
Yeah, and without proper vetting. I mean, this is always sort of makes me scratch my head. If the Democrats say they're these great humanitarians, right? Well, the humanitarian thing to do about the refugee crisis in Syria, don't bring them to a country, don't take them to Europe or to the United States where they don't speak the language, they don't know the culture, they can't assimilate, they can't get jobs, they don't have any friends, and they're out of their comfort zone. Put them in safe zones in the Middle East, safe zones that the Europeans will pay for, that the Gulf Arabs will pay for, safe zones that the Russians would probably go along with and agree to because it gets the people out of the places where the bombing is. Put the safe zones on the border with Turkey and Kurdistan, put them on the various borders where there is no fighting right now, and make them safe areas where refugees can go. And don't just make them tent cities. Build real proper buildings, have schools, have medical facilities there. And then maybe someday, if the fighting in the Middle East is over, those people can go back to their native lands, and the facilities that we built for the refugees can be used by the countries which take over then the safe zones.
She is Katie McFarland, Fox News.
Way too practical, don't you think?
Yes.
Yeah, well, exactly.
You make too much sense as always.
And she makes sense on Fox News as a national security analyst and host of DEFCON 3 at foxnews.com. KT, always enjoyable and educational. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Bye.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.